Good afternoon, my name's Les Jones and I'm joined today by my colleague Rebecca Dunstall.
Good afternoon everyone.
Our clinical lead at Careflex.
Hi.
This afternoon's session is the impact of positioning on effective specialist seating. As part of our training package, we always acknowledge that our seating forms part of a care package and it's only as effective as the other elements of that package. So today we've got our friends with us from Silvalea, Alice, Amanda and Judith. You'll meet them a little bit later in the presentation. If I leave Rebecca, just wander off and load the part of the presentation. So if I just explain to you a little bit about the format, we'll start with a little PowerPoint which will run through some of the theory on effective specialist seating. We'll follow that up with then a hands-on session where we look at the product, we look at our seating, and we will highlight the kind of key important factors of the correct selection and application of a sling, and we'll be using our friends from Silvalea to do that. A little bit of virtual housekeeping. If you could just ensure that your videos and your mics are switched off. We are recording the session. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask, you could, if you could use the chat feature, we'll endeavour to come back to you at the end of the presentation. We'll answer as many questions as we can, but realistically, we'll probably run out of time. If that's the case, we will follow up with some responses for you. At the end of the session, you will receive a pack, a virtual pack, which will give you a copy of the presentation. It'll also provide you with a link to the recording, plus any other documentation we discuss during the presentation itself.
Anything that pops up in the questions as well, we can
we'll recap the questions, the answers to the questions for you. So if you're ready, Rebecca.
Yeah.
Rebecca will just pull up the first part of the presentation. I'll hand you over to Rebecca and I shall see you in about 10 or 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Les. So yeah, what we're aiming to do then is just a really brief presentation to set the scene for this afternoon. Like Les said, we always emphasise the importance, of course, of good posture management and especially good seated posture within specialist seating. But a key part of that, of course, is how somebody gets into and out of the chair, because the chair is only as good as the positioning within it. I just wanted to start really by reviewing the clinical reasoning for specialist seating provision, why we assess, why we prescribe, and what we're aiming to achieve with the individuals that we work with. Of course, this list isn't exhaustive, and those of you who have joined our webinars before will know that we could talk for hours and hours, and we usually do. About the importance of good seated posture. But essentially what we're looking to do is to promote comfort, relaxation and safety within the chair. We want to enhance the physiological functions of things like eating and drinking, so swallowability, digestion, breathing ability. We want to protect the body shape and reduce the risk of postural distortion, manage energy levels and reduce the effect that fatigue can have on individuals. We need to encourage functioning independence, and we do that through getting postural stability, especially at the pelvis, because that's the foundation for good seated posture, because it dictates what happens above and below. But once we have that postural stability, what we can then see is freedom of movement in the upper limbs to be able to engage in tasks or occupational hobbies. We want to facilitate normal movement patterns or control abnormal movement patterns as much as possible. And then improve engagement, interaction and social inclusion, because as we know, that's a key part of an individual's well-being. But we can't achieve these seating objectives unless we meet the needs of the individual user within the chair. So we need to make sure they're positioned appropriately, because the chair will only be as good as the transfer into it. Now, as you know, we are going to be focusing on hoisting transfers for individuals who are hoisted, but good positioning, just as a reminder, good positioning is essential for any and all users of specialist seating, regardless of their ability. Now, correct positioning is critical for the promotion of health and well-being, especially some of the things that we've just covered, like comfort and independence and physiological function, and all those other wonderful positive changes that we hope to see. But remember that for a true holistic approach, to postural care and pressure management, we do need to ensure a regular change of position throughout that full 24 hours. But again, that's a whole other topic. If anyone wants any more information on the importance of seating within that 24-hour approach, then again we can send out recordings, because we've done a webinar on that last year. I think it was, Les. Yeah.
It's in the library of webinars that we've done.
Now, a key aspect of good transfers is the correct sling choice, as this will maximise the specialist seating system and its ability to ensure appropriate positioning within the chair. So we're thrilled that we get to work with Silvalea today, who are going to offer guidance on sling choice and get us thinking really about the clinical reasoning behind the types of slings that are available. The individual specific needs will determine sling choice, so things like body shape and size, postural control, muscle tone, strength, skin integrity, if there's any medical devices in situ, but Amanda will go through that in more detail when we look at the practical element. We must also consider the support network's needs to things like compliance, behaviour, carer effort, and any training requirements that we need to meet. And we need to emphasise, and this is something those of you who join our webinars monthly will know that Les and I always highlight the need for every chair to be set up to fit its user. This is a vital step in appropriate positioning, using all the functions and accessories safely and appropriately to be able to support posture appropriately, ensure maximum contact with the support surface, distribute weight evenly as possible, whilst also maintaining comfort and independence. It's critical then your seating prescription that we put in place and the subsequent setup is based on the individual's body shape and size, because if it's not, then it can actually cause more harm than good, and I can't reiterate that enough. The way the chair is set up will have an influence on positioning, which will then have an impact on things like the risk of secondary complications, postural deterioration, pressure injury, and ultimately reduced quality of life. Some of the functions that we will be looking at shortly when we have a look at the practical element, things like tilt in space, back angle recline, positioning aids, are vital elements of seating prescription as long as they're used appropriately and safely. There are going to be cases where we need to monitor extremely closely, or actually might even be contraindicated. So we just need to be mindful of those types of functions. For example, tilt in space, if somebody has a catheter, we just need to be mindful of the angle that it's set at, because we need to think about things like backflow, or individuals with dysphagia, maybe they've got swallow problems. Again, tilt in space might not be appropriate for them, so it's just to be mindful. I think the last webinar we actually done, Les, was on safe and appropriate use of chair functions, so we can happily send out the link for that as well, because it goes into a bit more detail. But I just wanted to highlight those areas. So what we found works best is by just giving this brief theoretical introduction, setting the scene, and then following it up with some case studies so we can put that into practice. So we're going to start with Jack. Jack is an 8-year-old active boy. He enjoys listening to music, socialising with family. He has a diagnosis of spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy, so presents with pelvic instability, hypertonicity, so he's got high muscle tone, a wind-sweeping deformity and an extensor thrust. He's hoisted for all transfers. He does have difficulty regulating his body temperature, uses a moulded wheelchair, but has no access to alternative seating. So in terms of his specialist seating prescription, when we go through the chairs now, what we're going to see is a focus really on things like tilt in space, a multi-adjustable back and head system, positioning aids, pommel, removable chair arms, and long-term adjustability. Now, these functions and accessories are not only key for the initial positioning within the chair, but also how that then works with slings, and using them both together to get the optimum position within the chair and maximise those pieces of equipment. And as we go through practically, that'll make a bit more sense. So in terms of our positioning objectives, we want to ensure, of course, appropriate seat dimensions, one thing we always emphasise, postural stability, accommodation and, where possible, correction of Jack's posture. We want to normalise muscle tone and try and reduce the impact that extensive thrust has on positioning and activities and so on. Promote functional movement and encourage engagement and interaction. Okay. So there's me back on the screen.
So the chair we looked at for Jack, we did try a couple of other chairs within the range, but it's the Smart Seat Pro was the chair that we chose after trying some of the other chairs within the range. It just seemed to be the most appropriate and the best fit. So I'll run through some of the key features of the chair as they apply to Jack. It's a tilt and space chair, 30 degrees of tilt. As you can see with tilt and space, the back to seat angle remains constant. So when we transfer Jack into the chair, tilting the chair back doesn't compromise its pelvic stability. It maintains that nice neutral position. But again, as we'll see in a little while, that transfer is key to that process.
Yeah, it's really important as well for his extensor thrust. Keeping, as I said, keeping that posture neutral, so we don't open up the hip angle, had a positive impact on trying to dampen down some of those abnormal movement patterns. So
the chair does come with back angle recline. If I just bring the chair a little bit closer to the screen for you to see how we operate that. So tilt and space is top right. Just squeeze the lever and release wherever's most appropriate for Jack. Back angle recline is a locked lever. Jack didn't need a lot of back angle recline, but he just needed a slight opening of the back angle. So that's a locked lever with us. So there's a little lock here. You can see me just taking that off. I squeeze the lever. When I release that, you hear it clock. You hear it click and lock. The other thing we did for Jack, we actually, once we'd set the back angle, we removed the lever to adjust the back angle because we were a little bit worried that people may be not perhaps understanding the effect of back angle recline on Jack and maybe adjusting it without kind of any clinical input. So we just took the lever off, 2 screws here, and loosened it, popped it into the back of the chair. So in effect, carers just needed to worry about tilt and space, which is that posture neutral movement. Chair comes with a built-in leg rest and an angle adjustable foot plate. You can see I've taken the arm off the chair here for Jack. Well, not for Jack, but just to illustrate the benefit and the access you get by removing the arm on the Smart Seat Pro. We needed to think about growth as well because Jack was 8. We needed to future-proof things. There's a lot of growth within this chair, built in as standard. We've got seat width and seat depth adjustment. So we ticked that box for Jack. Needed to consider pelvic support. So quickly as we could, once we transferred Jack into the chair, we needed to apply a 4-point pelvic strap.
That's really key for his postural stability. Again, to try and normalise some of that abnormal muscle tone for functional movement, but also to keep him safe within the chair because of that extensor thrust, there was a risk of him coming out of the chair. So again, positioning aids, when used safely and appropriately, it can often be a vital part of that prescription. And also then, the 4-section multi-adjustable back was a key component for Jack. It helped manage your kind of asymmetries. I'm not going to adjust the chair now because I've got it set up for our lovely model Judith. But basically, every section of the back is adjusted in a similar way. If I bring it to the screen, you can see that I have these little built-in ratchet levers. If I turn those anti-clockwise, it allows me to position each section. I can rotate that as well if I needed to, or I could drop that down or bring that back. It gives the opportunity to try and correct where possible, but accommodate fixed spinal positions, maybe a rotation or scoliosis or kyphosis. It's a compromise, a classic compromise with specialist seating. So those were the key features of the chair for Jack. So I'm now going to pass you on to Mandy and to Judith. We're going to look at sling selection for Jack and how it applies to application with the chair. Yeah, and obviously it's difficult to, I guess, reenact that type of setup. So we'll see Judith now. Judith will be introduced, who is our model. So we're trying to make it as real life as possible, but appreciate that obviously we are using models and yeah, Amanda will explain a bit more when she brings the slings in.
Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. Firstly, a massive thank you to Careflex and to Becca and Les for inviting Silvalea to this session. I've been working with Silvalea for over 22 years, and during that time I've gained a vast knowledge of slings, their suitability with various conditions. So today we are looking at two styles that we know suit the case studies that we are featuring. So the first sling for Jack, we have chosen or suggested the in situ deluxe shape sling. This is a full body sling with an integral head support, and it has very angled shape deluxe type legs, which we will show you how they work. We're using this open chair for a visual. I know it's not as realistic as it should be, but to give you an idea and to show you the features of the sling.
Yeah, today's session we're focusing on the product, isn't it? It's
Absolutely.
the moving in handling is something that we hope to cover in a future webinar, but we're focusing on the product selection, how we would integrate that with specialist seating today. Yeah.
Thanks, Becca. So we've got Judith, our model, if she wouldn't mind just seating there. So this is a divided leg sling, which can be introduced within a chair or alternatively applied on the bed. There are lots of tips and techniques to be able to help with the application, which would be covered in a future session. But for ease of this session, we are just going to make it look as easy as we can. So once you've applied the sling, if it's in a chair, we need to make sure that it's fitted as low as possible to the base of the seat. Don't worry about the top section. That will sort itself out when the body naturally fills in to the sling, when the hoist takes up slack. So the leg sections need to come around and wrap around each femur. It's important to ensure that these are fitted towards the knee. If they fit too far back, then it's going to be uncomfortable and not give enough support. So it's really important to get the sling as far down as possible and to ensure that these leg paddles are fully wrapped around the femur towards the knee area. There is a red modesty strap that connects these inner leg tapes. If we don't connect them, the legs will naturally splay, and then there's a risk of bottoming out there. Then we take the outer hoisting strap for the legs and feed that through. Thank you. Like that. We have got, for this scenario, a waist support. So because Jack's a bit wriggly, we have added the addition of the waist support, which is a soft strap here. Jude, if you can just feed it round. It's a soft little padded waist support through a channel with a bit of non-slip and a clip buckle that can be tightened and fixed to just give a bit more security. And it's a good actual indication of the correct positioning. Tuck that in there. So we've got the sling on. So Les, if you wouldn't mind bringing in the hoist, please.
That feeling of stability and security and safety for Jack, it was another key part of trying to dampen down some of that muscle tone as well and the extensor thrust, because that's what will really help to get maximum and the optimum position in the chair during that transfer.
The tapes on the sling are colour coded. So for visual aid, we've set them on a long leg and the yellow shoulder. So we can just take up just a little bit. And then we have also added that, thank you, the addition of a hip tape. So hip tapes are an extra pickup at the hip, which I'll explain the features of that in one moment. If we can go a little bit higher, please. Thank you. We just check, we need to make sure we've got it all fixed and attached correctly before we go too far. We're all good. A bit more, thank you. Thank you. I'll just remove that chair so we can then.
And again, this is just demonstration. Jack wouldn't be using it as a swing.
If we just look at the shape of the leg section on the sling here, you can see this paddle here. It's a full paddle, individually wrapped around the leg, as I said, which for a wriggler means that you've got individual support from those leg paddles, which is quite important. Also, the leg tapes are picking up from the outside of the leg, which means you've got more stability to the leg here and the hip area. And the hip tapes also will help to lift the hip, give extra support, take away pressure from the knee. And they are adjustable sliders. So these can be adjusted to be set at the same time or the same tension as the leg. So they need to pick up at the same time simultaneously. If they are too loose, then they won't give any support at all. So they can just be adjusted by the slider and then set in position. So just looking around, the sling fits around the body. There's no handles on this sling because it's made in the superfine fabric. So the superfine is a lightweight breathable mesh with inherent Coolmax in. So the Coolmax is a inherent property to help with wicking away moisture. So with Jack's issue, he has temperature control issues. This will help then to keep moisture away from the skin. It's a lightweight mesh. It has two-way stretch. So it hugs the contours of the body nicely. It is a fine mesh, so it can also be used for bathing. It will come with a little mesh bag that you can use for when it's laundered. But it does have a weight limit of 10 stone. So single layer is suitable for under that weight, and then for any weight over that, we'll do a double layer. So a double layer, which will take it up to 220. There is a little bit of access for toileting. So if we look round, you can see that I think you can make out Judith's. Can we go a little bit higher, please? So if we do need to do a hygiene transfer, then there is a little bit of access because of the divided leg section, although clothing would have had to be removed. There are pockets here for bones, so they can be inserted or taken out. Some people prefer to take them out because they're quite stiff. Just slide that in there. And you would need to take them out for laundering as well. But if you can see the shape there of the bones, just to give extra support. Although we do have a head support tape here, which can be adjusted to the required position. So the bones sometimes are just left out, depending on the individual needs. So that's all about the actual sling and the fabric. Jack has sort of windswept hips, so consequently this type of leg paddle will adjust to his natural position because of the individual leg paddles. So quite good shape for that. When he is active also, it won't shoot up into his groin like possibly a standard universal shape sling would. So it is a good shape for wrigglers and active users. So what we'll do is we'll transfer him into the chair. So if we come back here.
And Amanda, things like the hip tapes,
Yes.
that can help with positioning as well, because you can adjust them to be able to try and correct for the transfer.
Absolutely. So you know, if you've got someone that's quite asymmetrical, the hip tapes have slide adjusters, so you can make them asymmetrical to suit. Brilliant. To help just correct the transfer position. So if we just take.
So again, when we said about using the sling and special seater system together, things like tilt space can really help with the transfers, because you're essentially taking some of our effort away, because gravity will naturally then pull the pelvis into the back of the chair where we need it to be. The tilt space can be a really useful function as long as it's safe and appropriate.
Thank you, thanks.
Okay, just bring it away.
Just going to take the bones out now whilst we're sat in the chair. And just untuck the leg paddles. So if the sling is going to be left in for extended periods, it's quite useful then just to slide the leg paddle and tuck it to the side. And you can see here with this open side, because we haven't got the arm section on, that it's taken to the side. So effectively, there's hardly any sling underneath. So for, you know, if you've carefully considered that it's suitable to leave a sling in place, then you can see that there's not much left underneath. But if you need to take it out, then we just need to undo the belt. And Les, do you want to put the lat strap on, because we know Jack will then
wriggle that.
wriggle.
We mentioned about positioning aids, really useful function and accessory to be able to get that pelvic stability. So often during the transfer, that would be one of the first things we do when it's trying to get that pelvic belt on and fitted securely. Another good function, of course, for visuals for you to see is removing the arm. But it actually helps then, as Amanda's showing, to actually get access to the sling a lot more easily if we do need to remove it.
So if we do need to take the sling off, we would then just fold it back on itself, tucking it behind. Thank you. And then we would peel it off just by taking that tape behind, so it's away from the body. And then peel it round the side. Yeah, so that we can take it in. So that is the in situ deluxe sling. We will provide you with a data sheet after the session, which looks like this. So this is a useful information sheet that has everything you need to know initially regarding the sizes, codes, safe working load, and the fabric options that are available. So those will be going out after the session with your pack. So thank you.
That's
Thank
okay.
you.
Just one other thing we did mention as we transferred Judith into the chair, we just used the word tilt in space.
Did mention.
Did we?
Yeah.
Sorry, my mistake.
But we can emphasise it again.
Yeah, we'll say it again because
Yeah,
obviously
we
didn't
can
sleep.
reiterate
Yeah.
it.
I bring Judith up. Just ask you that. Next one, just hold with the chair.
Okay.
Back to Rebecca for a bit more theory.
Yeah, so let's introduce the second case study. And this is Dawn. Dawn is a 48-year-old lady who was a loving wife and mother. She experienced a stroke a few years ago and now presents with pelvic instability, low muscle tone and weakness, heavy leaning to the left, and fatigue, which was impacting on her posture, of course, because gravity was taking hold and pulling her down into that leaning posture, but it was also affecting her engagement as well in daily life. Hoisted for all transfers, but was particularly sensitive to being handled, so there was a need to try and limit the amount of transfers that would be needed. She used a standard armchair, but was frequently needing to be repositioned due to sliding forward within the chair, mainly because of that pelvic instability, but also the effects of fatigue as well. So in terms of the specialist seating, some of the functions we are going to look at, of course, just to mention it again, that individualised setup, getting the seat dimensions right, tilting space, positioning aids, this time external lateral support, because you can see that we use a different chair, so we needed that extra support at the trunk to maintain an upright position. Foot support, because often overlooked, I don't know if you agree, Les.
Yeah, it's a key component of any specialist seating system because, you know, as we said, I think you say we put 19% of our weight through our feet. So tilt and space the action will take the client's feet off the floor, so we need to provide some form of foot support.
Yeah, because that's really key to the postural stability, because it will impact on the pelvis and the trunk, because we naturally seek that proprioceptive feedback through our feet. So it's a really key part to try and normalise tone and offer safety and security within the chair. Because then what you might find is individuals who are clinging onto the arms of the chair or digging elbows into the corner just to feel safe within the chair. Another thing that's helpful for Dawn was a tray, not only for upper limb support, but also for obviously activities as well within the chair to maintain that engagement and interaction. So positioning objectives, pelvic stability, trunk alignment, and getting that head in midline for physiological function, but for the visual field as well. Foot stability, as we've mentioned, energy management and pressure care due to the risk of potentially being in a sitting position for an extended period of time, but then that's where different functions can come into play. I don't know if we've mentioned this already, but in terms of pressure care and postural care, it's not about getting this one perfect position. The key is a regular change of position, either through different equipment throughout the day, but also using things like tilt in space to distribute pressure to different parts of the body. Get the screen back up. There we go.
So for Dawn, we did try a couple of different chairs. We tried a Hydra tilt and we also tried a Pro, but we focused on the Hydra Flex. Seat depth and seat width set specifically for Dawn to provide that pelvic stability. Foot support, we actually made the foot plate a little bit longer to provide it with full foot support. So we're elevating leg rest with an angle adjustable foot plate. Again, we needed just a little bit of back angle recline for Dawn, and in a similar way to the Pro, what we did was right hand side tilt and space lever, we squeeze the lever, you can adjust. Back angle recline on the Flex is hidden away, so it'll be a one-time set, adjust and lock that away. The chair is, as I said, tilt in space. And tilt in space this time for Dawn was great because it helped with energy conservation. Just made it a little bit easier for Dawn to sit in the chair, not having to continually fight against gravity to stay in an upright position. Lateral support, we needed something quite strong on Dawn's left. So we've got this adjustable lateral system on a Flex. I'll bring the chair towards you for you to have a little look. Just adjust on the little ratchets and levers in the back of the chair. You can set that up. An individual setting just for Dawn. What's quite helpful about the way we adjust the laterals here, though, is that once they're locked in place, if we were to need to remove laterals to help with the transfer, we can, but they'll lock back into the exact place from where they were released. That wasn't actually needed for Dawn, but it's quite a helpful feature on the chair for the application of a sling.
Yeah, the good thing about the external lateral support, again, another function that's got to be used appropriately. But what you can achieve is that needed 3-point lateral support. You can set them so they're in the correct place at the trunk. So you have one lateral support to support on one side, then you'd have the left lateral support in the right place to help with that lean, and then you've obviously got the chair arms as well then to give you that 3rd point to be able to encourage an upright sitting position.
Another feature on the chair that helped, Dawn was slightly kyphotic, so the top section of the Hydra Flex articulates, and we could set that specifically again to support Dawn, very much accommodating posture and preventing further decline. Pelvic strap, again, some additional pelvic support, 4-point pelvic strap. So I think that they were the main features to consider for Dawn. So I'm going to pass you back to Amanda and Judith just to run through the latest sling application as it applies to Dawn. Okay.
Thanks, Les. Hi, right. With this case study, we have chosen a different style of sling, which is the in situ recline. So a very different shape. This one you can see is all in one, which would need to be applied on the bed. So slings applied on the bed, we either need to introduce with rolling, either rolling or with slide sheets. So any slings that are applied on the bed and you want to reduce any friction, use slide sheets. There's many techniques and tips that you can apply to help with that. But with this one, we've just got it here for Judith just to sit on it, please, for ease of visual here. So this is an all-in-one. It has a pommel strap that comes between the legs, and then the outer tape feeds through one of the inner loops here. So we're still getting an outside pickup of the legs. The pommel strap will give a little bit of a lift, which will help to balance the legs and prevent them from rolling in. So quite a good little feature there. And then we've got the shoulder tapes here. Les, would you kindly bring in the hoist, please? This one is in the black Superfine Plus fabric, which is a spacer fabric, and has a weight limit of 220 or 35 stone. Just take it down, please. Again, the tapes are colour coded. A bit more, please. Now with Dawn, she's very compliant, although she's, you know, she has had a stroke, but she's not going to be wriggly. We haven't put a waist support on this, but the waist support will help with positioning. So if you have got one, you can put it on. It helps to position it so you know where it is if it's at the waist, and that helps with the sling being in the right position. Thank you. We'll just take it up. This is a spacer mesh, which that can also be used for bathing, and it's also suitable to be left in position for extended periods, as long as the risk assessment's been done and suitability has been established. We just look. The sling, again, it wraps around the body. It's very smooth. The sling labels these days now are woven, so all labels now have woven information, safe working load, the washing instructions, all the codes, any safety features are detailed on that woven label. There's a woven sizing label and a serial number, unique serial number to this sling, and a date of manufacture. So the woven type labels will not fade as much as a printed one. There is also provision on this style for a hip tape. There's a loop here that you can add as an addition. So the hip tape will be added on. As in the previous one, it will then help to lift the hip area. So if we need extra support, and it helps to lift the hip and distribute the weight, taking pressure from behind the knee. We could also add a head support if we need to. On this particular situation, Dawn doesn't need the head support. There's no commode aperture though. However, there can be one added if needed. But if we're leaving the sling in for sort of an extended period, then we would probably not encourage the aperture type one because of there being a ridge. So if we just take it to...
Yeah. Bring it back.
Yeah. So using the edges of the sling to help either from behind or forward, then we can guide back into the seat. That's cute.
And again, you can see we've tilted the chair slightly to match that angle of the sling.
Thank you. Thank you. And if it has been determined that we need to leave the sling on, when we just fold the tapes back, tuck them out of the way, just put that under the head support there. And there we have, that's the in situ recline sling. And again, we have a data sheet with all the information, useful information regarding the sizes, codes, washing instructions and safe working load. Let me just check, see if there's anything else. Oh, hip tapes, yes, we did mention the hip tapes. They can be added to the sling. There's provision there for them. So there can be an addition that you can request. Also the chest strap, chest or waist support. Certainly there's two options, chest level or waist, depending on where is required. If that's to help positioning, then that is available as an extra, as is the head support. Applying and lying. So yes, if you need to apply the sling, absolutely, it needs to be applied on the bed. So if it's introduced on a bed, either with slide sheets or rolling, just need to be mindful if there's no head support, and if you're picking up flat, or if it's a profiling bed, that will help, or have a head support added to the sling. Any other questions?
I think Jess, our colleague Jess, is following the question. So Jess, is there any questions?
I think we're good for questions. Oh, actually, sorry, there was one. Would you be able to remind us of the name of the first sling that was mentioned in the previous case study?
Of course, the first sling was the in situ deluxe. So the in situ deluxe, and this is the in situ recline.
That's great, thank you.
Just having a look now. I think I saw somebody ask about the negative angle. Oh, that's been answered, yeah. And I think somebody was asking about the provision of chairs in elderly care. We got experience of that. We work very closely with a lot of nursing homes and residential homes.
Yeah, very much so. It's hard to put a percentage on it, but the majority of our chairs would go into an elderly care setting, I would have thought.
Yeah, we I guess one thing we always emphasise with specialist seating is that it really is only as good as our whole 24-hour approach.
Yeah.
And of course we can say about all the wonderful seating objectives. We're obviously passionate about seating and all the objectives that we aim to achieve in terms of normalising tone and encouraging comfort and stability, functional movement and all those things. But actually, if the individual is then possibly at night time in a fetal position for 12 hours without adequate nighttime positioning, then we're just not going to get the best out of the chair.
We can do in situ,
Yeah.
if that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we forgot for Dawn was the addition of a tray function. Let's pop that, okay, just pop your hand up there for me. Okay, this be added to the chair. Just click in place at the back. Good for, functional, for reading, for meal times, but also good for posture as well. Helps to encourage opening up the shoulder girth.
Yeah, very good for physiological function, and sometimes that anterior support can help with things like an increased kyphotic posture as well, to give that feedback. Just make my way through the chat. I think somebody asked about pressure care as well. What is it? Yeah, is the sling stretchable enough when being left in the chair? So it doesn't cause bottoming out. Again, important in elderly care.
Yeah,
certainly with the deluxe sling. So it's got an aperture. So if you take the leg sections to the sides, then the IT area is not on the sling. So that area is free. The issue that with taking the sling legs in and out is, will that cause extra shearing? So it's a case of weighing it up, risk assessing and working out together as to whether there's going to be further issues with taking the sling in and out. It may be that you need something a little bit a different shape. So again, it's on an individual
It's that risk
basis.
assessment, isn't it?
It
really,
is,
for the
absolutely.
individual?
And the monitoring,
Yes.
with any kind of new equipment, you'd be looking at monitoring and gradually introducing it. Probably one of the things in terms of a care plan and handover that we emphasise is if somebody has a new piece of equipment that they don't sit in it for 8 hours on their first day, we really
it's
got to
kind of
introduce things
setting
gradually.
expectations,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
And of course, there is going to be a risk with any kind of prolonged sit-in. If there is unequal loading on tissues, there is going to be that risk. Everyone is at risk of a developing a pressure injury, as we know. So we need to monitor that and balance that compromise if we are increasing the risk likely by having an in-situ sling potentially. But actually, if we don't leave it in place and we try and remove that sling, and suddenly then we develop in a pelvic obliquity, what's the best situation, the least
It's that holistic
restrictive.
assessment
Yeah.
again,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Taking into account as many different factors as we can, and it's not a nice word, but it is the word that we use a lot of. It's a compromise situation. There's no right or wrong answer, if you like, to the question.
Yeah. Somebody else is asking then about in situ slings, how long can they stay in? And again, that's completely individualised. How long is a piece of string? Sadly,
Yes,
we can't generalise these things. Some people, I mean, if you look at guidelines, like NICE guidelines, I think they're saying people at high risk of pressure injury change of position every 4 hours, but then you've got some people who within 15 minutes can be developing
I mean, we
problem areas.
elderly care setting, we could be working with a resident who's been in bed for a prolonged period of time, and that sitting out process is an incremental process, where we slowly build up tolerance. It could be 20-minute intervals, but it's what needs to happen.
Yeah, care planning, we mentioned this a lot as well. I think we've also done a webinar on care planning, did we?
I think we don't know
Yeah.
just about everything.
Yeah, just about everything, but that's a really key part because, great as therapists, as assessors, as product specialists, we can be there for that initial assessment and guide people. But actually, once we leave that setting, how do we make sure there's continued compliance and appropriate use of that? So care planning is a really key part. We've got some information on that. On things like a pocketbook and an encyclopedia, just templates that can be used, but that care planning and handover and the monitoring process is going to be really key.
The handover process is critical.
Yeah.
You know, the first time somebody uses a bit of equipment,
Training
with the
needs.
appropriate sling,
Yeah.
It's key to the success.
Not to add workload here, but in the long run, it will hopefully reduce the risk of re-referrals and actually deterioration happening. So it's worth putting it in. There's quite a few questions popped up actually.
There's one on colour coding.
Yeah, what helps determine which
Yes.
colour to use.
And again, it's working it all out. It's once you've chosen the appropriate style, it's then working it out. Short shoulder, long leg will give an upright position, which may be too upright. So then you would go to the second shoulder for a more reclined. So it really depends on the positioning you need to achieve, and then document it in the care plan. Yeah.
There was another question on extending at the knees when hoisted, Mandy.
Extending at the knees.
Yeah, is there any tips for sling use? For somebody might extend.
If they extend, sort of either recline slightly, keep the leg short, so a shorter leg pickup to try and break up that extension, so keep everything tight. We would perhaps recommend a neck roll and head support to keep the head forward rather than that. There are specific slings for severe extenders that can help to break up that pattern.
I guess in a similar way, we're just showing you a snapshot of what we can do, and there's a whole wide array of possible solutions, both in the terms of slings and in terms of seating and accessories and different bits and pieces.
Yeah, and there's a seating question here about the types of pressure care.
Well, on a standard with a Careflex chair, you'd have what we call a water cell technology, which is a mix of 4-way stretch breathable fabric, a water cell base with a memory foam style overlay. They work together so that the bony prominence becomes absorbed in the seat surface, the surrounding surface rises and spreads the pressure over a greater area. That gives us a medium to high pressure care rating. We've clinical evaluations on the effectiveness of that, and we can supply you with links to the website that'll give you more information. You can use a third-party sling. There may be a need to use a bespoke customer sling. I'm all slinged out. There could be a need to use a third-party cushion. Could be a custom-made cushion or an alternating cushion. We can accommodate that form of cushion within a Careflex chair. What we recommend though is that you use one of our docking cushions or nesting cushions, and that will lock the third-party cushion in place. It'll stop it from moving around.
And it keeps it as a system then, that's really key though, you keep it as a whole seating system rather than just a cushion on top of a cushion, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, and it'll eliminate the gaps around the front, the back and the side. It just ensures a safe, resolute way of mounting the cushion on the chair.
And that you've got maximum contact still with that support surface. Do you do joint visits with therapists when issuing postural chairs? Yes.
Yes, it's the nature of what we do.
Yeah, it's actually ideal if
we see ourselves, and I'm sure, Amanda, you'd agree. We're part of a multidisciplinary team, and you take input, if you like, on the slings and the chairs from us, and we can recommend. But ultimately, you know, we work with clinicians, and clinicians guide the process, and we input into that process.
Yeah. With the tray at meal times, would you sit the chair up to make the table horizontal level? Yeah, that's one of the limitations. That's why it's another chair function. Every chair function I know we've got to be mindful of, but in terms of the use with trays, especially for eating and drinking activities. Another thing to be mindful of is people who use like PEC systems, like communication boards. If they rely on eye gaze, just be mindful if we are attaching things like that to chairs, that we think about that whole 24-hour approach and actually what we need the chair to do, because if it's a case that somebody needs tilt or needs back angle recline for comfort reasons, or because they've got hip dislocations or subluxations, we need to open up that hip angle, do we then need to consider just a table that goes over the chair rather than a freestanding table? Yeah. Are these types of chairs and slings distributed in Belgium already?
I'm not sure, but we'd love to help you.
We've certainly got agents and dealers that would cover that.
Okay.
For the slings. So
whoever asks that question, we'll take note of the details.
Yeah, or perhaps just drop us an email at info@careflex.co.uk. We'll supply you with the contact details as part of the package that follows up the presentation.
We've got another one here. It's good to see so many questions.
Yeah.
Do you guys offer back to basics training by any chance? I'm a newly qualified OT with very little experience at seating equipment and what it entails considerations needed. From a Careflex point of view, we have, I mean, before COVID, pre-COVID, that's a favourite term these days, isn't it? Pre-COVID, we'd done face-to-face introductions and masterclass training. We've obviously gone into webinars at the moment, but hopefully seeing face-to-face.
Yeah, we can certainly help on a group basis. If you've got a group of colleagues who'd like some in situ training, we're more than happy to come and help out with that. Just again, drop us a line and we'll get back to you with the date and we can arrange that.
With Silvalea are doing online sling training. We've got a back to basic understanding sling shapes on the 14th of April. If you are interested, then please contact us from the website. We are then doing other sessions which we can send you the information on as well.
Somebody's made a good point here, just worth noting that they seek advice of tissue viability nurses on how long people can sit down. Yes, certainly if you use a whole multidisciplinary team, if you've got access. Sometimes you might need speech and language therapy input as well, especially if somebody's got dysphagia, swallow problems, making sure that the functions are appropriate for them. Yeah, it's there, certainly. Recommended upholstery when someone has regular incidents of incontinence.
We can provide an extra layer of fabric, which basically insulates the foam. Yeah, again, it's something we pick up and discuss as part of the assessment process. So yeah, that is something that the fabrics that we use are inherently antimicrobial, so they have a quality that prevents the growth of germs and viruses.
Somebody here in Jersey purchased 3 Smart 3 Pros. Probably someone for you to get in contact with it to have a chat.
Yeah, definitely.
About chair setup and local provider train. So yeah, we'll take your details and Les will probably get in touch with you on that.
Yeah, I'd love to come to Jersey.
With regards to the slings, a table that compares the types of slings. I think that's part of the product sheet and stuff, is it? Bit of information on
Yes.
there.
We do have another poster that will come out in the pack, which is a selector. It shows our range that's on the website. So if you're trying to sort of select a range of different types, then you can use this to help you see the options, and they're all in like family groups.
Does it give guidance on the type of hoist you can use it with?
Yes,
Yeah,
so
okay.
the majority are the standard loop type hoists, and there is a selection of slings for clip hoists as well. So they are divided up on the poster.
Somebody's asked about lateral supports and can they cause discomfort? Yeah, I mean, if what we'll do, we'll probably send out the link from our last webinar, because that goes into a lot more detail about functions and accessories, and we covered lateral supports in detail on that webinar. So we'll answer that question to send another link.
It's a key consideration as part of
Yeah.
the assessment. Obviously, you know, the seat depth, seat width, midline, but comfort is key for us. If somebody's not sitting comfortably in a chair, they're not going to want to use a chair. So it is very much a key. And again, it's part of that compromise holistic assessment process.
Yeah, things like you've got to be mindful of back angle recline and a person's ability to readjust. So yeah, we'll send that out.
There's a question about compatibility, certainly with Silvalea slings on other companies' hoists. We have a compatibility statement on the website to reassure you of that.
I think we've got one more just about trays can help with pelvic tilt. I don't remember mentioning that. It's mainly to do with the anterior support for the upper limbs. We mentioned
Just
about obviously encouraging opening up the, yeah, so sorry, we meant the opening up the shoulder girdle and the anterior support for things like a kyphosis. I mean, you can certainly, because every body segment will impact on another body segment, by trying to open up the hip girdle, you might see some impact on the trunk and the pelvic stability as well. But you have to go right back to the pelvis to work on that before then introducing things like the accessories on top. I think I've caught up with all of them. If we've missed anything, we'll just get in contact with us anyway, and we can answer those. Yeah.
So we'll bring the session to an end. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Hope you found that helpful.
Yeah, thank you for the engagement as well. That was great.
Yeah, it's great to have a
Thank
good
you.
question and answer session at the end. It keeps us on our toes and gives us, you know, food for thought. If there's nothing else, we'll bring the session to the close. Oh, have we got one more question there?
No, I think it's just comments. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon. Yeah. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.